Welcome to the Market Me podcast with your host, Mike Moll. Each episode of Market Me deconstructs real campaigns for actual businesses to improve their marketing efforts. Mike is the founder of Social Media House and a digital marketing consultant who teaches marketing strategy to executives and their teams from small business to Fortune 500 companies. Let's get started.
All right, Bonnie, thanks so much for coming on.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
It's been a while since I've seen you.
I know, at least a year.
I know. Tell the audience a little bit about A&C.
So we are a strategic communications and partnership agency. We've been around since the early 80s. So we call ourselves these days a 40-year-old startup. In that, who we were back then is really different than who we are now, what we do, our clients, that kind of thing. I bought the business from its founder about 15 years ago.
Got it. And so it was always in the PR and communication space before?
It was. It had a very specific focus on arts and culture and sponsorship. So the founder was a passionate arts leader, really, and came to Canada from New York and saw opportunity with early days corporate brands doing some interesting sponsorship in the arts, big museums, ballet companies, symphony, and that really was the focus of the company. It was called Arts and Communications. When I joined almost 20 years ago, we were still doing a lot of that. We did naming rights for big cultural centers. We did sponsorship of seasons and exhibitions. And we also did PR around those things. Over the years, I just felt like there was more opportunity expanding from the arts. We still worked with the arts, but not exclusively.
Got it. And what's the profile of the typical customer that you work with today?
Great question. We have a couple of arts clients still. We just recently sold the naming rights to the formerly Sony Center to Meridian Hall.
Funny enough, I was at an event at Meridian Hall, the Mozart event.
Yes.
And I was looking up the address and I kept thinking, no, this is the Sony Center. I don't think there's two venues beside each other. And I showed up and I was like, I think they changed the name.
Yes. Well, it's been in all the information, but yeah, it's recent for sure. So that is still pretty much from the legacy of how we started. But our current clients include Perrier, San Pellegrino. We have Van City Investment Bank, for whom we do corporate communications. So we've got really a wide-reaching number of clients, some consumer-facing, but increasingly more business-to-business clients. And we do strategic communications. And we also, on the other side of the table, help them look at how and who might they partner with in a way that will help increase brand awareness for them.
Got it. And obviously, I know we've had some conversations about kind of the changing landscape with digital and all these other pieces. Have you seen kind of PR shift as a product over the last couple of years?
Oh, absolutely. It isn't even PR the way it used to be. So that's why we actually don't even necessarily say PR. We say strategic communications, because these days, while we do some media relations, which is typically what people think of when they think of PR, it now includes influencers of all stripes, the micro, the nano, the big ones, celebrity, not that we do a lot of that, but that's certainly inclusive in there. And we do really anything to figure out how to get a brand moving from A to B. Public relations per se, because the way that the media landscape's changed so much, has to include digital. It has to include some kind of social media platform, especially if it's consumer facing, but even if it isn't. Our B2B clients still need to have some kind of presence. And so, yeah, it's not even the same industry.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you found the influencers compared to the way that you were traditionally doing it before? I mean, we've worked with a couple of different campaigns at different levels, and I find a really weird mix. Some really successful, some really missed. But I guess that's pretty much how it would have been if you were striking up bigger partnerships before the influencer.
Absolutely. And I mean, we look at it in the same way that we looked at different media channels or media targets. So who are their followers, the people that we want to reach and touch, and how effective they are engaging with their followers. So in the same way we might assess, do we try to pitch the Globe and Mail in the old days versus a radio channel? We look at influencers, they're still purveyors of information, and there's a halo effect with them. The ones that are effective really do have authenticity, and that's what we're looking for.
Got it. And how, obviously you've got a lot of experience looking for the right people, the authentic person. How are some of the ways that your agency and yourself, how do you kind of vet, how do you think about looking for these people?
Yeah, it's mostly my team that does that work. So I'm feeling a bit of a poser. I know at a very high level. Yeah. I mean, we have a process of how we evaluate their followers. I mean, increasingly too, I think we look at big bang for the buck. So a lot of our campaigns recently have used nano or micro influencers because the level of engagement they get is much higher than someone with a much bigger following. And that's what we're after. In a lot of cases, our clients' budgets are not big, and we really need to prove and have proof points. So measurement becomes a big piece of that. And don't ask me about measurement because I have someone on my team that really knows the answers. It's not me.
We'll stay away from it. That's great. And so what other pieces, like what other things are you seeing changing in the communications, the corporate space? I know a lot of people are moving to a lot of kind of video pieces, audio pieces. Podcasts is obviously something that's taking off. What are you seeing in that space?
I mean, all those things, exactly as you said. And I think that we are also, which is very exciting to us, looking at how to help. We have worked with some startups and some tech companies, and I find that philosophy still can apply to some companies. We like working with brands in transition, I'll say. They either want to change either what they're doing or the perception of what they're doing, or they want to go to another level because they're relatively new. So what we find is we're looking for those less traditional medium to help with the sales funnel. So I'll say even 5 years ago, we might have been brought in and we'd be just go do this. And we love this. We're brought in to say, okay, what are your sales goals? How might some of what we do, be it potentially a podcast or being a guest on a podcast, get you a greater awareness with the 15 technology people in the city that you want to talk to. And it's very strategic. They are tactics, obviously, but it's a strategic exercise.
Got it. And would you say overall that technology has more helped or more hurt the kind of ability to reach? I mean, obviously with technology and all the different mediums, it's a lot more segmented. There's a lot more outlets and a lot less attention on each thing. But compared to like what it was before where you'd go into the newspaper or on TV, do you think that the digital side, in your opinion, has been more helpful or more hurtful?
So I wouldn't. I mean, it's the $1 million question. I don't know that I would frame it as helpful. I think it's created new opportunities and made other things not an opportunity. It's certainly made traditional ways of doing things more challenging, for sure. So if we call that hurt, like if someone knew how to just pitch a whole bunch of journalists and he or she hasn't figured out how to work in this world, then it has hurt them and their ability to do what they need to. But I tend to have an optimism bias and think it actually has created many more opportunities. There's no question it's made it more challenging for us as communications professionals to get up to speed on the many different channels and ways that different consumers are captured. It also, and again, this excites me, we have to think about consumers differently and our target differently. So before you could sort of use an age demographic, how we live now is really differently. I, in some ways, have more in common with you living in a city, traveling, doing certain things than I do with someone I went to high school with who's retired in Florida. And so, but I'm their age. And so those ways of looking at it, and so what might be on my feed might look a little it probably doesn't look similar to yours, but more similar than what is on a high school friend's feed if she's lying on the beach with her grandchildren. So I think that thinking about people that way and how to reach them, for sure it's more challenging. And it's challenging for us as consumers to kind of try to tune out what we don't want, but also not be in our bubble.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That's a very different lens. So that's interesting. How do you think about events? Because I know you guys are, helping launch different events. That's one thing that I've always been curious about, is how do you use an event to really create an experience, create hype. So tell me a little bit about that process, more just from a creative standpoint.
For sure. We don't actually do that many events. There have been times since I've owned the company where we did a lot of events as an extension of a strategy. I think that the most important thing with anything like this is, what are the objectives? So why are you doing it? How are you going to measure its success? And is the cost benefit analysis worth it? So for example, I'm trying to think of an example where we would recommend an event. So like a pop-up, which is a big deal now. And everybody's looking for that pop-up that's going to go viral and it's Instagrammable and all those, again, consumer brands we'll talk about. I think that having that as a goal is a really scary thing, because we don't know what actually is going to go viral. We look at the ones in hindsight, we say, well, of course that would. And then people try to replicate it, never does. I look at it as, what are the objectives we're trying to reach? What's part of our brand DNA that would make an event and interacting with people? So if you're a digital only brand and there is no touch point in the bricks and mortar world, do we even call it that anymore? And whatever.
I still do.
So you know what I mean? To then have an event or a pop-up makes a ton of sense, because then you're putting people behind it, you're fleshing out a brand experience that previously had only been online. So one of my favorite brands is Allbirds. I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah, very interesting.
I own 5 pair. Admittedly, I'm a bit of an addict. I first got exposed in San Francisco, where they're like another retailer. But here, we didn't have a pop-up until there was one on Queen West. Then there was a little pop-up in Nordstrom. It's a digital brand, and they really stand for a lot more than fun shoes. They stand for the environment. They're really forward-thinking. To me, them doing pop-ups makes total sense, because shoes, you do want to try it on. As easy as they make the return, which they do, it's still a worthwhile. So a quick pop-up, you see the colors, you feel them, that feels important. So I consider pop-ups in the event category.
Yeah.
Makes a ton of sense. And as expensive as it probably is, I'm sure that it does what it needs to do. Similarly, I saw on my feed yesterday, Oreo's done this pop-up at Union Station. And I don't think about the Oreo brand anymore. I don't eat them. I don't have kids that are that age. And so I thought, wow, Oreo's obviously doing all this product innovation, if you can call it that. They've got a whole bunch of different, and the delight that people have taken in this pop-up. So again, I would say probably pretty effective for meeting their objectives. They're introducing a new product. They're wanting to get back on people's radar.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and you see, I mean, there's some very odd experiences out there these days. The Dr. Seuss experience. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
It's in Mississauga, and it's as crazy as you would imagine. There's feathers coming out of the floor, and it's.
Wow.
But I'm not sure if it. I guess it's promoting the Dr. Seuss book brand. Somebody is still leveraging that stuff. But yeah, there's been some really weird, and even in the Bay at the Eaton Center there, the 6th floor, the 7th floor, they keep making these like Instagrammable walkthrough areas.
Yes.
Just to like drive people in.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, and again, it goes back to like the objective. If the intention is to create Instagrammable moments, then I don't think there needs to be a bigger purpose. It needs to be bigger than, because bigger than, oh, we want this to go viral and we want people to take pictures of it. It's a great byproduct. If you create an incredible experience that's really visual and unusual and interesting, people will do that. But to have that be the reason to do it, I feel like you're already, it's contrived for me. But I'm not necessarily the target for a lot of these things.
Got it. And so for somebody that's looking, who's got a company that's growing up, it now needs some communications. How would you recommend to somebody listening to help vet, find the right person, find the right agency for them? Obviously you guys have been in and out of a lot of different proposal and sales meetings, some of which have gone really well, some engagements maybe not. Like, that's just the nature of business, right? But what would you say would be your advice to somebody that is looking to help? How would you help them vet, find the right company?
So I think the first thing would be to get clarity around why you need a communications agency, and to be open to hearing how much that might cost. Have a budget, but be open to hearing what that budget gets you. The more clear that a brand is on their objectives and goals and what success looks like, the better their choice will be in an agency, because then they'll be looking for the agency's experience having done those things. And I think the other piece, which is not great advice, but it's chemistry. It's like anything. Do I feel like these people got me? Did they listen more than they talked in the first meeting? So ideally there is a briefing. So if you're talking to 3 or 4 agencies, ask referrals, people you respect, if they have other, that would be what I would do, what I do when I need to find people to work with. And then really try to narrow it, do a little bit of homework, do some digging, and don't like spray and pray and have 10 agencies. It's not worth the time. Do a little more of the work up front and vet it and say these people appeal to me. I'm not sure why. And be curious about them. What turns them on? How do they measure their own success? And I think that a good agency would want to be your partner. If you don't want a partner and you want a plumber, you just want someone to come in and fix something and go away, then be clear on that. And then you'll find there are agencies who are really good at that, but don't find one that wants to marry you and you just want them to fix something.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And would you say, from your experience, I guess it really depends on the brand and what they're trying to do, but do you find that the partnership style approach, that like longer term, as you develop a rapport, you understand more about who they are and what they're trying to accomplish? Because I would imagine at the beginning of it, you have these surface level conversations and you get to the bottom of some of it, not all of it. And your first round of messaging or whatever, it's good, but it's not right there. Do you feel like these types of relationships typically take time? Would you say that, if people are thinking, oh, I could just hire someone quick to do this one thing, do you think that can have a negative impact on the outcome?
Potentially. As an agency person, you probably feel this way in your business too. You always want to know more about your clients. You want to hold hands with them. But I think it depends on what it is. I think there are projects or things that can be very straightforward. And if it's a good agency, they should get it right the first time. It depends on if you're looking for a year-long communications plan that you're investing in. Absolutely, it takes a little bit of time. You want an agency that can hit the ground running and be quick study for sure. And again, it goes back to your own clarity on what you want. And sometimes people, when it comes to communications, they don't really know what they want. They know what the result that they want. But that's fair. And it's frankly the agency's job to prod for that and to say, have you thought about this and have you thought about that? Or some people have a real fear of media training, and yet they want to raise profile. And so, getting to things like that. But I think that it could be anything. It's like a ball of string. So yes, a big juicy project that somebody is looking for a real partner, for sure. It also has to do with their in-house capability. if a brand's got a staff and somebody's going on a mat leave and they've got a big campaign coming up or a big launch, easy to understand. You're filling in, and if you do a great job and make yourself indispensable, maybe there'll be other work there. It's like anything. But if you really, if it's a startup and you've got young, relatively inexperienced, brilliant folks who don't know anything about communications or how to get their brand up, then sure, we'd like to be their partner. I mean, as an agency, it would make sense to say, okay, open your kimono. Let's understand all of your goals. Do you want to sell this thing in 3 years? What do you want to do? Because we'll take different tacks knowing that.
Got it. Makes a ton of sense. Well, that's great. What would you say that you're the most excited about in the communication space right now? Like stuff you're looking forward to, things you're interested to see how it plays out, anything?
Well, I'm not, and again, what I do specifically tends to be more on the civic partnership piece. So like my own work. As an agency, we do lots of things in the communication space. So I'll speak to that. Generally, what excites me about the whole area is how people are now, the pendulum swinging. The people are now, consumers are saying, I'm doing a digital detox. I'm actually thinking of getting off of Instagram. So we're now seeing some real response to the flooding of influencers and who's an influencer and what's real influence and all those things that we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago. We're now sort of at a really interesting time where meaning and authenticity is trumping, and he's ruined that word for me, small t, trumping other things. And that'll be really interesting to see what the next chapter shakedown looks like. So I'll say the influencers and the podcasts and the online ways we get news and stay up to date need to have meaning and authenticity and a breadth that's really refreshing and exciting to me in general. And then I'm also, and again, this is part of the partnership work that we do, I love seeing a focus on cities and how cities are figuring out new ways to make ourselves livable, to be inclusive, to have diverse populations moving in. All of that excites me, and because we've worked on some city projects like the Meridian Hall, but also Yonge Dundas Square, we've worked with the City of Toronto, working with the City of Calgary, Montreal. That excites me a lot.
Cool. That's great. Well, I really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Great to see you. Bye.
Bye.